During the roundup and selection of Jews sent to the concentration camps, there have been many heroic stories documented. Stories of desperate parents doing anything to hide their children from the Nazis, hiding them in closets, in barns, entrusting them in the hands of great non-Jews, people they never met. But there are few stories, like the one you're about to see, of an 18-year-old boy who had avoided the roundups, but when he heard the terrible news that his beloved father was taken by the Nazis, he voluntarily turned himself in, not because he didn't love life, but because he did not want his father to be all alone in the world. Please direct your attention to the screen.
When the Nazis marched into Austria in March of 1938, life for the country's approximately 180,000 Jews changed dramatically. The situation went from bad to worse that November during what became known as Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, when Nazi brown shirts, the Hitler Youth, and anti-Semitic sympathizers went on a rampage all over the country, burning synagogues, Jewish businesses, and homes. For families like Tini and Gustav Kleinmann's, Jews who had lived in Vienna for generations, an almost idyllic existence turned into a nightmare. Gustav was a successful upholsterer. The youngest member of the family, Kurt, was just 8 when things began to change.
My memories of Vienna as a child are outstanding and fantastic. I had a wonderful boyhood. We were kids. We lived across the street from a market. The market was our playground.
Not long after Kristallnacht in 1939, the Nazis showed up at the Kleinmann home.
The Nazis came to the house and were looking for my father, and he wasn't home. As a result of that, they said, "We'll take your son, and if he turns himself in, we'll let your son go." My father came home, heard about that, and said, "I'm going to the police station." And my mother said, "Don't do it, get out of the house."
Kurt's father refused to listen to his mother. But before he could go to the police station, neighbors let the police know he was home, and the Nazis arrested Gustav and took him away. Father and son, along with thousands of other Austrian Jews, ended up at the Buchenwald concentration camp. Kurt's mother, Tini, went into action to do what she could to protect the rest of the family. She managed to send Kurt's older sister Edith to England to work for a family as a maid. And with the help of the Jewish Children's Aid Organization in New York, she was able to send Kurt to live with a prominent Jewish family in Massachusetts. At Buchenwald, 48-year-old Gustav and 16-year-old Fritz were assigned to the quarry detail, back-breaking work where they, along with 14 other men, were forced to push a stone-filled wagon weighing some 4.5 tons uphill, more than 800 yards, being lashed and yelled at by the guards. Writing in a diary he miraculously kept hidden throughout the Holocaust, Gustav described how he and Fritz toiled. "We are proving ourselves," he jotted down. But as they were proving themselves, Fritz, along with other Jewish prisoners, was singled out and beaten after an attempt on Hitler's life. Gustav almost died from dysentery. And then one day, in 1942, Fritz discovered that Gustav was going to be transferred to Auschwitz without him.
They're both in Buchenwald, and all of a sudden he learns that my father is being transferred to Auschwitz. And he went and he says, "I've got to go with my father," even though the other inmates who were friendly with him told him, "You're stupid, don't go, look what's going to happen," and that sort of thing. "If you want to live, you've got to forget your father." And he just said, "There is no way I can forget my father."
Gustav wrote in his diary, as he and Fritz traveled to Auschwitz, "Everyone is saying it is a journey to death, but Fritzl and I do not let our heads hang down. I tell myself that a man can only die once. Gustav and Fritz were sent to a subcamp of Auschwitz called Monowitz. Most of their comrades at Buchenwald had already been sent to their deaths, but the father and son managed to survive because they were skilled laborers. Fritz became involved in the resistance movement, passing information about what was going on with the war to his fellow prisoners and helping others to escape. He even went as far as bringing arms into the camp. One day, Fritz was seized by the SS, accused of planning a large-scale escape. He was lashed 60 times but refused to give up the names of his friends involved in the resistance. Fritz was returned to the camp, but fearing that the SS would bring him back for more interrogation, friends hid him in the isolation room at the camp hospital and then recorded that he had died. He recovered there from his lashing and then reemerged into the camp population with a new identity and a new job as a warehouseman. Father and son were reunited, but their ordeal was far from over. January 1945. The Russian army was approaching Auschwitz. The Nazis evacuated prisoners from the camp, putting them on trains for the Mauthausen camp deep in Austria. On the train, Fritz urged his father that it was the moment for them to escape. But the now 53-year-old Gustav was exhausted and not well. He convinced his son to flee on his own. Fritz leapt from the train but was recaptured and sent to Mauthausen. Gustav was sent to a different camp, Mittelbau-Dora. For 3 months, father and son had no idea if the other was still alive. That May, Mauthausen was liberated by U.S. troops. The gates of Mittelbau-Dora were opened by the Americans a few weeks earlier. Fritz returned to Vienna, to the apartment building where his father's shop used to be. He had no idea if Gustav was dead or alive. He did learn that his beloved mother and youngest sister had been taken away in 1942 and murdered in an extermination camp near Minsk. With happiness, he found out that his sister Edith was alive in England and his younger brother Kurt in America. And then Gustav returned to Vienna to the same apartment building. The son who had refused to desert his father was now reunited with him. In a few years' time, Kurt would also be reunited with his brother and father when his tour of duty as a U.S. Army soldier brought him to his hometown, as well as with his sister Edith. Kurt then learned of his father's secret diary and the exploits of his brother in the resistance at Auschwitz. Gustav died at the age of 84 in 1976. Edith lived to the age of 96. And Fritz died at the age of 85 in 2009. Kurt became a successful pharmacist. He also devoted his time and energy to making sure the legacy of his father and his brother would live on for the ages. Just this year, The Boy Who Followed His Father into Auschwitz, based on Gustav's diary and Fritz's writings, was published to great acclaim. It remains on the bestseller lists in Great Britain and the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the surviving son and brother of Gustav and Fritz Kleinmann, Kurt Kleinmann. On behalf of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, I'm honored to present to you and your family the Medal of Valor.
I would like to thank the Wiesenthal Center for this honor. I accept it with humility, not only for myself, but also on behalf of my immediate Viennese family, as well as my extended American family. Most, if not all of you, have heard of the British rescue operation, now known as the Kinder Transport. You may have even read the book or seen the movie Into the Arms of Strangers, but certainly few, if any of you, are aware that between 1934 and 1945, approximately 1,200 such unaccompanied children from Europe, primarily Germany and Austria, were allowed to enter the United States. I arrived in the United States with two other children, a girl 11 and a boy 14, in March of 1941. We met in Berlin, where we needed to pick up additional official documents. We continued traveling together and spent a month in Lisbon waiting for our ship to sail to the United States. 38 other children were supposed to join us in Lisbon, but never arrived. I therefore believed for years, as I grew up, that the three of us were the last unaccompanied children to escape Europe. It was not until years later that I learned that we were part of a much larger group. I became a member of such a group founded by Iris Posner, now known as 1,000 Children, or OTC, as we abbreviate it. Iris Posner, a social scientist at that time, wondered after seeing the movie of the British rescue operation if the United States did anything similarly. She uncovered the story and was able to identify as well as locate 600 of us. Unlike the British operation, she learned that we were not sponsored by any government program, but rather through the intervention of private Jewish organizations. Not all of us were as fortunate as I. Some ended up in orphanages, some in homes where they did not get along with siblings. But regardless, we all survived, and most ended up with successful lives. I therefore share this honor with all my OTC colleagues. I, of course, was very fortunate and ended up with a loving family, Judge Samuel Barnett and his three sisters, Sarah, Kate, and Esther. They treated me as if I were their own. While I always referred to them as uncles and aunts, I always kidded that I ended up with a new father and three new mothers, each one expecting the best from me and not letting me get away with anything. Living in such a prominent household, I could no longer be the Spitzbub or little rascal that I might have been in Vienna. They too deserve to share this night with me. After almost 75 years have passed since those dreadful days described in the two books, The Stone Crusher, which was published in the United States, and The Boy Who Followed His Father into Auschwitz, and that was recently published, of our family Holocaust story written by Jeremy Dronfield. Our story of survival, loss of life, and rescue accompanies anyone remotely connected to that period. It is representative of all who suffered through those days and therefore needs never to be forgotten. My father and my brother's experience through 6 years in 5 different concentration camps are living testimony to the realities of the Holocaust and are contrary to the conspiracy deniers. Their memory is sharing this honor with me, and of course, so is the memory of my mother, who had the courage to send an 11-year-old 6,000 miles halfway across the world to save his life. I wish to express my thanks to my wife, Diane, for 62 years of a loving married life, who always supported me in my professional career wherever it took me. To my 3 sons, Bill, Paul, and Jim, who for many years joined me in my love for sailing and skiing, their 2 beautiful wives, Laura and Pam, and of course, our 4 grandchildren, Eli, Max, Allison and Theo, two of them who are here with us this evening. Had I not arrived on your shores, I wouldn't have had the pleasure of seeing them grow up. And last but not least, I'm also grateful to the author, Jeremy Dronfield, for bringing our Holocaust story to your attention. Thank you very much.